A woman dreams that she is back in the house where she grew up. At first, everything looks ordinary. The hallway is narrow, the wallpaper is old, the rooms are familiar in the way childhood rooms are familiar, even when you have not seen them for years. But then she hears water. It is not raining outside. Nothing is leaking from the ceiling. The sound comes from behind the locked doors. One room after another is filling with water from the inside. She reaches for a key, but the key is warm, almost alive. When she touches it, she wakes up. The quickest mistake would be to ask, what does water mean? Then, what does a house mean? Then, what does a key mean? Within a minute, the dream has been turned into a shopping list of symbols. Water means emotion. A house means the self. A key means access. The interpretation sounds clever. It may even be partly true, but something essential has already been lost. Marie-Louise von Franz would have slowed the whole thing down. She would not begin by asking what water means in general. She would ask why this water is behind these doors, in this house, at this moment, for this dreamer. She would ask where the dream begins, where it moves, where it becomes strange, and what the final image is trying to do to consciousness. That is the difference between reading a dream and consuming a dream. Von Franz was one of the most important figures in the Jungian tradition. She met Carl Jung in 1933, worked closely with him for decades, and became one of the great interpreters of dreams, fairy tales, alchemy, and symbolic life. But her importance is not only that she stood near Jung. Her importance is that she made Jung harder to misuse. Jung gave modern psychology a language for the unconscious. He showed that dreams were not random mental trash. He saw that symbols could carry more intelligence than the conscious ego. But once a symbolic language becomes popular, it creates a temptation. People begin to treat it like a code book. If you dream of a snake, it must mean transformation. If you dream of a mother, it must mean the mother complex. If you dream of falling, it must mean insecurity. The symbol becomes a label. The label becomes an answer. And the dream, which was alive a moment ago, becomes dead. This is where von Franz matters. She did not treat the unconscious as a machine that prints messages in symbolic shorthand. She treated it as an autonomous reality that speaks through images, sequences, moods, reversals, and shocks. For her, the dream was not a private slogan. It was a small drama, and a drama has structure. It has a beginning, it has a setting, it has characters, it has a problem, it has a movement. Sometimes it has a failed ending. Sometimes it has a surprising solution. Sometimes it leaves the dreamer with an image that the ego cannot yet understand. Jung's basic idea was that dreams often compensate consciousness. That word matters. A dream may balance a one-sided attitude. It may bring in what the conscious personality has ignored, inflated, denied, or sentimentalized. It may not tell the ego what it wants to hear. It may answer the ego from the other side. Imagine a person who thinks of themselves as endlessly kind. They never get angry. They never say no. They call this maturity. Then they dream of a wolf pacing outside the kitchen door. A shallow interpretation says, wolf equals danger. A sentimental interpretation says, wolf equals instinct. A better Jungian question is, what attitude in the dreamer's conscious life requires the appearance of this wolf? Is the wolf only threatening? Or is it carrying the aggression, appetite, and boundary that the dreamer has exiled from waking life? Von Franz's discipline was to keep the whole image alive long enough for that question to become uncomfortable. If these hidden rooms of Jungian psychology interest you, keep this channel close. Von Franz is where dream interpretation stops being a trick and becomes a discipline. Her method begins with humility. The interpreter does not stand above the dream as a master decoder. The interpreter stands beside it, almost like someone listening to a foreign language whose grammar must be learned from the image itself. First, there is the personal context. What is happening in the dreamer's life? What has been avoided? What attitude has become too certain? Second, there are the dreamer's own associations. A river does not mean the same thing to a fisherman, a flood survivor, a painter, and a child who grew up beside dry land. The image belongs first to the psyche that produced it. Third, there is amplification. This is where Jungian work becomes wider than private biography. A figure in a dream may echo myths, fairy tales, religious images, alchemical motifs, or old stories that have carried psychic patterns for centuries. Amplification does not replace the personal meaning. It places the image in a larger field. Fourth, there is the sequence. Popular dream interpretation often ignores this. The question is not only what appears, it is what happens. Does the dreamer run from the animal, feed it, fight it, follow it, or become it? Does the locked door open, stay locked, disappear, or turn into a mirror? Does the child in the dream speak, hide, drown, laugh, or lead the adult somewhere? The meaning is not in the object alone, it is in the movement. This is why von Franz's work on fairy tales is so important. Fairy tales, for her, were not childish decorations placed on top of psychology. They were among the clearest expressions of archetypal patterns because they are stripped down. A king, a forest, a witch, a foolish youngest son, a talking animal, a forbidden room. These are not realistic characters in the modern novel sense. They are structural figures. They show how the psyche moves when it is not busy explaining itself. In a fairy tale, the hero often begins in lack, exile, poverty, stupidity, or humiliation. Something is wrong in the kingdom. The old order cannot repair itself. A strange helper appears. A task is given. A prohibition is broken. A descent happens. A treasure is found, but only after the hero learns a rule the ordinary world did not teach. Von Franz saw that dreams often behave in a similar way. They are compressed stories of psychic imbalance and possible correction. This does not mean every dream is grand or mystical. Some dreams are small and almost irritating. You lose your shoes. You miss a train. You are back in school without having studied. You try to call someone, but the phone has no numbers. But even these small dreams may be precise. A missed train may not mean failure in general. It may show that the dreamer's timing is wrong. A lost shoe may not mean lack of grounding in a generic way. It may show that the dreamer cannot walk the next part of life with the attitude they are currently using. The dream does not explain your life for you. It asks a better question. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable, because many people do not want a better question. They want the dream to confirm the identity they already have. The spiritual person wants the dream to prove they are chosen. The wounded person wants the dream to prove they were right to withdraw forever. The ambitious person wants the dream to authorize the next conquest. The ashamed person wants the dream to sentence them. But the unconscious is not a public relations department for the ego. Von Franz's great lesson is that the dream often arrives exactly where consciousness has become too smooth. It introduces a disturbing detail. It makes the hero foolish. It turns the familiar house strange. It puts water behind the doors. So return to the woman in the childhood house. If we use a dictionary, the dream is easy. House equals psyche, water equals emotion, key equals access. The answer becomes, she needs to access her emotions. That may be true, but it is too flat. The dream does not place her beside an ocean, it places her in a childhood house. The water is not flowing freely, it is trapped behind doors. The doors are locked. The key is not metal cold, it is warm, almost alive. The dream ends before she opens anything. Now the image begins to speak. Perhaps the emotional life is not absent, it is contained, pressurized, room by room in old compartments of the personality. Perhaps the childhood structure can no longer hold what it is sealed away. Perhaps the key is not a technique, but a living relation to the blocked material. Perhaps the ego wakes up because opening the door would change too much too quickly. Notice the difference. The first interpretation gives advice. The second interpretation creates an encounter. Von Franz was careful because symbolic material can inflate people. Once you discover archetypes, every mood can begin to feel cosmic. Every attraction becomes anima. Every irritation becomes shadow. Every coincidence becomes fate. The ego does not disappear. It simply learns a more impressive vocabulary. This is why she kept returning to the discipline of the image itself. What does the dream actually show? What does it not show? Where does the energy move? Which conscious attitude is being compensated? The dream may be symbolic, but that does not make it vague. In fact, a good dream interpretation is often more exact than ordinary advice. Advice says, set boundaries. A dream shows a black dog sleeping across the threshold, and the dreamer cannot step over it without waking it. Advice says, heal your inner child. A dream shows a child refusing to leave a burning school until the adult admits they never learned to play. Advice says, trust your intuition. A dream shows a blind woman handing the dreamer a map with only one street drawn on it. The image is stranger because it is more accurate. That accuracy is also why fairy tales mattered to von Franz. A fairy tale does not say, develop courage. It says, the youngest son must go into the forest after his older brothers fail. A fairy tale does not say, integrate the rejected feminine. It says, the ugly helper at the well must be honored before the kingdom can be restored. A fairy tale does not say, face the shadow. It says, the monster must not be killed too early because it may know the path. The old stories do not simplify psychology. They protect it from slogans. At the same time, von Franz was not asking us to worship dreams. This is important. The unconscious is not morally perfect. It is not always wise in a simple way. It can be archaic, overwhelming, cruel, beautiful, compensatory, and confusing. Jungian work is not obedience to every inner image. It is dialogue. The conscious ego has a role. It must respond, test, and carry responsibility in the outer world. If a dream reveals anger, that does not mean the dreamer should become destructive. If a dream reveals longing, that does not mean the longing is literally right. If a dream shows a death, that does not mean a literal death is predicted. The symbolic attitude keeps two mistakes apart. The first mistake is reduction. It is only stress. It is only memory. It is only random. The second mistake is inflation. It is a command from the universe. Von Franz stands in the difficult middle. The dream is not nothing, but it is not a license to abandon judgment. It is a living symbolic event that asks for relationship. If this way of reading dreams is useful, stay with me. The people after Jung did not make the unconscious simpler, they made us more honest in front of it. So what should the viewer take from von Franz? Not a formula, a posture. When a dream stays with you, do not rush to translate it. Write it down exactly. Keep the sequence, the odd detail, the mood, and the ending. Ask what attitude in your waking life may be too narrow, too proud, too passive, too defended, too spiritual, too reasonable, or too hopeless. Then ask what the dream adds. Does it bring an animal where you have become too polite? Does it bring a child where you have become too efficient? Does it bring an old woman where you have become too young in your thinking? Does it bring water behind doors where you have called yourself calm? This is not self-help in the fast sense. It is slower and more demanding. It does not give the ego a new brand. It asks the ego to listen to what it did not produce. That may be why von Franz remains so useful now. We live in a culture that wants instant meanings. A symbol appears and we want it explained. A dream appears and we want it converted into content. A feeling appears and we want it managed before it changes the story we tell about ourselves. Von Franz teaches the opposite movement. Do not flatten the image too early. Do not make the dream polite. Do not turn the unconscious into a motivational speaker. Let the image answer back. At the end, the woman is still in the hallway. The water is still moving behind the locked doors. The key is still warm in her hand. But now she is no longer asking, what does water mean? She is asking, what in me has been sealed away so long that it has begun to fill the house? And that is a very different question.